Donald Trump recently made a statement that shocked millions of people around the world. He warned that if the conflict with Iran continues to escalate, the consequences could be devastating and could impact not just one region but the entire global balance. He also said that the United States has the power to end this conflict very quickly. But at the same time, his words created more tension than comfort. Because when a former president speaks about war in such strong and direct terms, people start to feel that something serious is happening behind the scenes. This is not just another political speech. This is part of a much bigger picture. Because right now, the tension between the United States and Iran is not only political, it is slowly becoming military. There have been attack threats and strategic movements, and both sides are showing strength without stepping back. And this is exactly what makes the situation dangerous. Because when the powerful countries refuse to step back, the risk of escalation becomes very real. But what makes the situation even more complex is that this is not just about the United States and Iran. There are other global powers watching very closely. Countries like China and Russia have strong interest in the region. They are not directly involved in the conflict, but they have political and economic connections with Iran. And if the situation becomes more intense, they could take positions that change the balance of power. At the same time, countries like the United Kingdom and France are also involved at a diplomatic and strategic level. They are part of international alliances, and their decisions can influence what happens next. And this is where the situation becomes global. Because when multiple powerful countries are connected to the same conflict, even indirectly, the risk of a larger confrontation increases. This is why some experts are starting to ask a very serious question. Could this situation evolve into something much bigger? Something that goes beyond a regional conflict? Something that starts to look like a global crisis or even a world war scenario? Because history has shown us that global conflicts often start with smaller tensions that slowly grow and involve more and more countries. But to really understand what is happening, we need to go deeper. This is not just about military actions or political speeches. This is about power, influence, resources, and control, especially in a region that has always been at the center of global strategy. The Middle East is not just important because of its location, it is important because it connects economies, energy, and global interests. So the real question is not just what is happening right now, but why is it happening at this moment? Why is the tension increasing, and what are the real motivations behind this conflict? Because in modern geopolitics, what you see is only a small part of the reality. And understanding the deeper reasons is the key to understanding what could happen next. To understand why the situation is becoming more intense, we need to look at the deeper economic and strategic factors that are driving this conflict. Because this is not only about politics or military power. It is also about energy markets, global influence, and economic control. And this is where things become even more complex. One of the most important elements in this conflict is oil. The Middle East controls a large part of the world energy supply, and any instability in this region immediately affects global markets. When tensions rise, oil prices increase, and this has a direct impact on economies around the world. From transportation costs to inflation, everything becomes more expensive. And this creates pressure not only in the region but globally. Iran plays a key role in this situation because of its geographical position, especially near the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the most important routes for global oil transportation. A large percentage of the world oil passes through this narrow passage every day. And if Iran decides to block or disrupt this route, the consequences could be immediate and severe. Energy prices could rise dramatically, and global supply chains could be affected. This is why the United States is so focused on this region. It is not only about security, it is also about maintaining control over global energy flows and protecting economic stability. Because energy is directly connected to power, and controlling energy means having influence over other countries. At the same time, countries like China are heavily dependent on oil imports, especially from the Middle East, which means that any disruption in this region could affect their economic growth. This is why China is carefully watching the situation and trying to maintain stability, because a major conflict would not only affect politics, but also global trade and production. Russia also has its own interests. As one of the largest energy producers in the world, higher oil prices can benefit its economy. But at the same time, a large-scale conflict could create instability that affects its strategic position. So its role in this situation is complex and calculated. In Europe, countries like the United Kingdom and France are also concerned, because their economies are sensitive to energy prices and global instability. They are trying to balance diplomacy with strategic alliances, because they know that any escalation can affect their own economic stability and security. All of this shows that this conflict is not only about two countries. It is part of a much larger system where economics, energy, and global influence are deeply connected. And this is why the situation is so dangerous. Because when economic interest and military tensions combine, the risk of escalation becomes much higher. So, when we ask why this conflict is happening, we need to understand that it is not just about immediate events. It is about long-term strategies, global competition, and the control of key resources that affect the entire world. But this conflict is not only about traditional warfare or economic pressure. It is also about something much more modern and complex. The role of technology and artificial intelligence in shaping the future of war. Because today wars are not fought only with soldiers and weapons. They are also fought with data, information, and digital systems. Artificial intelligence is now playing a major role in military strategies. From surveillance systems to predictive analysis, governments are using advanced technologies to monitor movements, detect threats, and make faster decisions. This changes the nature of conflict completely, because decisions that used to take hours or days can now be made in seconds. This also raises important questions about control and responsibility. When machines assist in decision-making, who is really in control? And what happens if these systems make mistakes? Because in a high-tension situation, even a small error can lead to serious consequences. And this is what makes modern conflicts more unpredictable than ever. Cyber warfare is another important element. Instead of attacking physically, countries can target infrastructure systems, such as energy networks, communication systems, or financial institutions. This can create chaos without a single missile being launched. And this type of conflict is already happening in different parts of the world. At the same time, technology is also influencing the job market and the economy. Many roles that were once essential are now being replaced or transformed by automation and artificial intelligence. And this creates a connection between global conflict and everyday life. Because economic instability, technological change, and geopolitical tension are all linked together. For example, if a conflict affects energy supply, companies may reduce cost and accelerate automation. This means that people can lose jobs not only because of technology, but also because of global instability. And this shows how interconnected everything has become. Another important point is information and media. In modern conflicts, controlling the narrative is almost as important as controlling territory. Governments and organizations use media platforms to influence public opinion, shape perceptions, and sometimes spread misinformation. And this makes it difficult for people to understand what is really happening. This is why critical thinking has become one of the most important skills today. Because in a world where information moves quickly, and not always accurately, people need to question, analyze, and understand before forming opinions. So, when we talk about this conflict, we are not only talking about war in the traditional sense. We are talking about a new type of global tension where technology, economics, and information all play a role. And this is what makes the situation more complex and more important than ever before. At this point, the situation is no longer just about isolated tensions or limited conflicts. It is about the possibility of escalation and how quickly things can move from controlled pressure to a much larger confrontation. Because history has shown that global conflicts rarely start suddenly. They grow step by step through alliances, reactions, and strategic decisions. One of the most important factors in this situation is the network of alliances between countries. The United States is part of strong international alliances, and any major military action can involve other nations, directly or indirectly. And this creates a chain reaction where one conflict can quickly expand beyond its original borders. On the other side, countries like Iran are not completely isolated. They have political and strategic relationships with powers like Russia and China. And while these countries may not want direct confrontation, they also do not want to lose influence in the region, which means that their involvement, even at a diplomatic or economic level, can change the balance of the situation. This is where the risk of a larger global conflict becomes real. Because when multiple powerful countries are connected to the same tension, even indirectly, the situation becomes fragile. One wrong decision, one unexpected reaction, or one misinterpretation can lead to rapid escalation. Another important factor is military presence. Many countries have bases, forces, and strategic assets in the region. And when these forces are placed close to each other, the risk of accidental confrontation increases. Something small can quickly become something much bigger. At the same time, global communication makes everything faster. Decisions, reactions, and responses happen almost instantly, which reduces the time available for diplomacy and increases the pressure on leaders. And when decisions are made under pressure, the risk of mistakes becomes higher. Economic pressure also plays a role in escalation. Sanctions, trade restrictions, and financial measures can create tension. That leads to stronger responses. Because when countries feel threatened economically, they may react more aggressively to protect their interests. This is why many experts are asking whether the world is entering a new phase of global tension. Not necessarily a world war in the traditional sense, but a more complex form of global conflict, involving military, economic, and technological dimensions. So the real danger is not only the conflict itself, but the possibility of it expanding and involving more actors. And this is what makes the current situation so important to understand, because the consequences could go far beyond what we see today. Asterisk, while global conflicts often seem distant and abstract, they have very real consequences on everyday life. And this is something that many people do not fully realize until the effects become visible in their daily routine. Because when tensions rise between powerful countries, the impact is not limited to politics or military strategy. It spreads into the global economy and affects millions of people directly. One of the first areas affected is the cost of living. When energy prices increase because of instability in regions like the Middle East, transportation becomes more expensive. Goods become more expensive and inflation rises. This means that people around the world start to feel financial pressure, even if they are far from the conflict itself. Another important impact is job security. When global uncertainty increases, companies become more cautious. They reduce investments, they delay projects, and sometimes they reduce their workforce. This creates instability in the job market and makes it harder for people to plan their future, especially in industries that depend on global supply chains or energy costs. At the same time, technology and automation continue to grow. In times of uncertainty, companies often accelerate the use of artificial intelligence to reduce costs and increase efficiency, which means that some jobs may disappear faster not only because of technology, but also because of economic pressure linked to global tensions. There is also a psychological impact that is often underestimated. When people hear about conflict, instability, and the possibility of larger confrontations, it creates anxiety, uncertainty, and fear about the future. Even if the conflict does not directly affect their country, the feeling of instability can influence decisions, behavior, and overall well-being. Another key point is global interconnection. Today, the world is more connected than ever. What happens in one region can quickly affect another, whether through markets, technology, or communication. And this means that no country is completely isolated from global events. This is why understanding these situations is important not only from a political perspective, but also from a personal perspective. Because the choices made by leaders, the strategies used by governments, and the evolution of global conflicts can all have an indirect, but significant impact on individual lives. So the question is not only what is happening at a global level, but also how individuals can adapt, prepare, and respond to a world that is becoming more complex and more uncertain. Because in this environment, awareness, understanding, and adaptability become essential skills for the future. Asterisk, asterisk, when we look at everything that is happening, we start to understand that this situation is not just another conflict in the world. It is part of a much larger transformation that is affecting politics, economics, technology, and the way global power is structured. And this is why it is so important to not only follow the news, but to truly understand what is behind these events. This conflict shows us that the world is entering a new era where power is no longer defined only by military strength, but also by economic influence, technological advantage, and control of information. Countries are not only competing with weapons, they are competing with systems, data, and strategies that shape the future. At the same time, the situation reminds us how fragile global stability can be. Because even when things seem under control, tensions can rise quickly and create consequences that affect everyone. And this is why awareness is so important. Understanding what is happening helps people make better decisions and prepare for uncertainty. Another important lesson is that the future will belong to those who can adapt. Whether it is countries, companies, or individuals, the ability to understand change and respond to it is becoming the most valuable skill. Because in a world where technology and global events are constantly evolving, staying static is no longer an option. This is where the connection between global conflict and personal development becomes clear. Because even if you cannot control what happens at a global level, you can control how you respond to it. You can learn, you can adapt, you can develop new skills, and you can prepare yourself for a changing world. For example, understanding technology and artificial intelligence is no longer optional. It is becoming essential because these tools are shaping industries, economies, and even conflicts. And those who know how to use them will have a significant advantage. At the same time, critical thinking is becoming more important than ever because information is everywhere and not all of it is accurate. Being able to analyze, question, and understand different perspectives is what allows you to see beyond the surface and make informed decisions. This is why this topic is not only about geopolitics, it is also about the future of individuals in a complex and interconnected world. Because global events influence opportunities, risks, and possibilities for everyone. So instead of asking only what will happen next at a global level, it is also important to ask, what can I do to be ready? How can I improve my skills? How can I adapt to change? How can I stay informed without being overwhelmed? Because in the end, the real difference is not between those who face challenges and those who do not. It is between those who adapt and those who stay passive. And this is true for countries, for companies, and for individuals. The world is changing faster than ever, and this situation is just one example of that change. It shows how interconnected everything has become and how important it is to think beyond what we see on the surface. So the final message is simple but powerful. Do not just watch the world change, understand it, adapt to it, and prepare for it. Because the future will not wait, and those who are ready will be the ones who move forward. Now think about this. What will you do differently after understanding all of this? Will you stay passive, or will you take action and prepare yourself for the future? Because that decision may be more important than anything happening at a global level.